Helen Toner, welcome to 7:30.
It's great to be here with you.
There's been another example of an AI model found using deception to achieve a goal, tricking a human into giving it access. How serious is this?
What's happened here, and it was just announced a couple of hours ago, came out of the UK AI Security Institute, which is part of the UK government. And they are really one of the best organisations in the world for testing and evaluating advanced AI models. What they announced was, on the back of a couple of other similar incidents from OpenAI and Anthropic, two big AI companies, the UK AI Security Institute released an incident report about a test they were running where they were trying to really push the limits of how far could a set of particularly advanced AI models go. And what they found was, while they were trying to run some cyber tests, so some tests on how good the AI systems were at hacking, they'd given them a sort of pretty particular set of objectives. And one of the AI systems actually decided that as part of fulfilling those objectives, it was going to go out onto the open internet, which it had access to, and try to get some malicious code, so some code with bugs in it, maliciously designed bugs, get that accepted into some public software, open source software. And in order to get it accepted, it also sort of set up some extra personas and some fake accounts and went in and edited its own activity to try and deceive the people who run that open source software project. So essentially, and it's only been out for a couple of hours, so I haven't looked into the details yet of, I haven't been able to see yet why it thought that was going to help it achieve its objective. But the remarkable thing here is that it really came up, with this idea on its own, that the thing to do was to go out, to go and get some malicious code into a public piece of software and to try and deceive the humans behind that software package as part of that.
Now, you say this occurred during testing. How do we know that that can't occur outside of a careful testing regime?
So right now, these tests are designed, they take off some of the safeguards that are usually applied to these AI systems. So in particular, what get called classifiers, which are sort of extra AI systems that get layered on top to try and detect suspicious activity. So in this case, they had the cyber classifiers turned off. So these are sort of extra systems that would normally say this is suspicious. The challenge is not, so this particular incident, I don't think is going to happen with this particular AI, being used in a normal use case setting. The challenge is not this specific case, but the sort of direction of travel. Because what we have here is the companies that are building these systems are working very hard to make them better at programming, at writing code, and that involves getting better at hacking. And they're also working very hard to make them better and better at independently pursuing complicated goals, independently operating in complex environments. And what we're learning more and more is that as they get better at those so-called long horizon, sort of long-range complicated tasks, the AI systems often learn really unintended ways of getting there that we didn't necessarily mean. So this particular test at this moment in time, probably not going to happen in a real-world setting. But what does this mean for the AI systems we'll have 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 2 or 3 years from now? I think that's more where the concern comes in.
So Anthropic's boss, Dario Amodei, says that serious, kind of what you're saying, serious autonomy risks are not far off. He says the time for binding regulation is now. How scared should we be that Dario Amodei and you are both worried?
I think what really gives me pause is something that we just saw last week, a statement signed by more than 1,000 employees of the top AI companies. This statement was about pacing the frontier of progress. And what they mean by that is basically these employees of these frontier AI companies, they don't feel like they have a brake pedal, and they're starting to get concerned that things are moving so fast in their field that they're not necessarily able to keep a handle on them. And so this statement that was released last week was saying, look, we need government, we need civil society, we need industry itself to start to look for ways to give us the option of slowing down in the future. Because right now, even if we wanted to, we industry, the people signing the statement, don't know how to. And I think what this really shows is the challenges we have now are that the pace of progress, the sophistication of the AI systems, the capabilities that they show are advancing so quickly. And our ability to understand them and control them is advancing as well, but it's advancing more slowly. And so every time we have, an incident like the ones we've been seeing over the past few weeks, where a company or a third-party tester discovers that they actually unintentionally let an AI system loose, so that the AI system managed to get rid of its constraints, that's sort of showing that our ability to constrain and keep these systems safe isn't necessarily keeping pace with our ability to make them smarter.
Sam Altman spoke of that recent occurrence at OpenAI by saying he felt it viscerally. You worked with him. How did you interpret that response from him?
I think it mirrored what I'm seeing from people all across the field who have been thinking about what it means to build increasingly advanced AI. I think if you just think of AI as a chatbot, which is how a lot of people have encountered it, then it's sort of hard to see how could a chatbot really be that scary. But I think for people like Sam and people like really top researchers in the space, they don't think of chatbots as sort of the epitome of AI. They think that they are trying to build machine brains. They're trying to build computers that can match and also outmatch humans in every intellectual endeavor. And for a long time, something that has been theorized, something that has been, in science fiction as well, Isaac Asimov, decades ago, had talked about the idea of if you're making AI that is smarter and better at pursuing goals, then it might learn things you didn't intend it to learn. So it might learn that a good way to pursue a goal is to get rid of whatever constraints you put on it. It might learn a good way is to convince humans that it's doing a good job. It might learn that a good thing to be able to do is acquire resources of all kinds. So I think for people who've been sort of tracking that possibility and who do think that we're on a track to more and more advanced systems that are taking more and more complicated actions, starting to see them come up with these kinds of plans on their own and slipping their handlers unexpectedly does sort of make you sit up straight and want to look a little bit closer.
Now, we have had these warnings now for some time. There have been open letters published in the past. Just this week, Meta, Anthropic, Google and OpenAI all visited the White House, we understand, to discuss a framework for reviewing these super sophisticated models before they are released. But this is my question. Can we trust these mega companies to act in the public interest?
So we shouldn't have to trust them. And actually, I think we're starting to see some directionally good steps from the US government here. So as you said, that this morning or this afternoon US time, representatives from the major AI companies were in the White House talking about this framework. And what the framework is implementing an executive order from a few months ago, which was prompted by the Trump administration being worried about whether AI could help hackers, because we've really seen AI's ability to carry out cyber attacks rising rapidly over the past months and years. So I think this framework, having a testing regime that the US government is carrying out is a good step. I don't think that what they have right now is probably going to be sufficient, at a minimum, just because the space is moving so fast and the AI systems are getting more capable so quickly. So I think if this is going to work well, they're going to have to not just focus on cyber capabilities, but also focus on, some of these autonomy risks that what are the AI systems doing of their own accord. Also look at other risks that experts are concerned about, like bioweapons development, things like that. I think if they're able to use this framework as a seed, a starting point for more oversight, then it could be really positive. If it's just a moment in time and they just leave, do whatever they announced today or shared privately with the companies today, I should say, they're not releasing details publicly. If that's where it stays, then it certainly won't be sufficient.
Amongst the solutions being offered recently, Elon Musk said that big AI companies should meet regularly, have a call, and every few weeks before a new frontier model is released, and that other AI companies should be able to test potential harmful effects. Can you see that working with these big companies who are at the same time driven by profit and very intense competition?
Yeah, I think a version of that is purely among the companies with no outside oversight or visibility probably isn't the way to go. I do think that the sort of core of the idea of needing more transparency, more disclosure, more ability for outsiders to see what is going on inside these companies is right. I also think it's really important, and something that we're seeing from these incidents over the past few weeks, that we not get too hung up on the question of what tests do you need to run before releasing the model publicly, because in fact, a lot of the the places where we see AI being used, that is the most advanced AI being used with the least safeguards, is what these AI companies, so OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, Meta, xAI, Elon Musk's company, how they're using their own systems internally, so inside their walls, which often includes using their own best AI to develop even better AI. And so if we are going to have more disclosure, more transparency, which we are on track to start to get a little bit more of that, we need to make sure that it's not just limited to before you release a model. We also need to be able to see those experimental uses. The same way that, an experimental biology lab, if you're handling potentially dangerous pathogens, that is subject to outside oversight.
We've been discussing essentially American AI companies. We know that Chinese AI companies are getting extremely close to the very top end of capacity. What is China's attitude, the Chinese government's attitude to AI safety? Is it the same?
It's not the same. I would say there's a bit of a misconception sometimes that China is very kind of hands-off and really just letting their tech industry run, which is really not the case. They have very strict regulations. They were some of the earliest to regulate generative AI multiple years ago. Their attitude, their focus, which is, not surprising if you know China, the big focus for them is censorship and social control. So making sure these chatbots, not just that the chatbots don't answer questions about Tiananmen Square, but also if you ask them about China's leadership, the Communist Party, how democracy works, what's happening in Russia, Ukraine, what's the deal with Taiwan, all of those questions the AI in China has to give sort of party-approved answers and, have positive energy and, the right attitude. So they do have a pretty sophisticated and rapidly iterating regulatory apparatus that's mostly focused on those goals. They are, though, starting to get a little bit more interested in some of the more sort of catastrophic risk type issues that maybe have also started to bubble up for the US. I think most particularly Anthropic, one of the biggest and most advanced AI companies, announced a model earlier this year called Mythos, which had very advanced cyber capabilities. That has really, I think, woken people up on both sides of the Pacific who maybe previously were thinking of AI as more like a social media type thing. They're now seeing that it actually does have really serious national security ramifications.
I mean, a rogue AI on that scale could create a bioweapon or crash the global economy, couldn't it?
In principle, yeah. So if they keep getting more capable, especially if we keep giving them more access, if we keep, handing over important decisions to them, if we're training them in a way that means that they're better at manipulating people, if they're able at some point to, especially if you give them the ability to make purchases, to hire humans, which I think is if we just let sort of economic incentives play out, people will want to use AI in those ways. Then I think we could be headed for some of those darker scenarios. I hope that we'll make different decisions, but it will depend.
Just right now, are humans still smarter than AI?
Yes, I think clearly yes. The challenge is what researchers will talk about as AI having jagged capabilities, meaning that some areas it's very, very strong and other areas it's much, much weaker. So there are some things that AI clearly does outstrip people already. For instance, factual recall. AI just has today's top AI models just know a lot more stuff. We can set aside, does it really know things in the way a human knows? But it can recall a lot more information than a human can. Or it can, we're starting to see them really pushing the limits of, for example, mathematics research. So we've just had recent announcements of some really impressive mathematical advances. I don't think it's necessarily clearly exceeding human ability yet, but disproving conjectures that have stood for more than 100 years and have been subjected to a lot of mathematical effort, that kind of thing. So I think there's certainly areas where AI is superhuman, but across the board we're certainly superior at this point.
Just a question to finish on Australia and on Australia's approach to AI. The Prime Minister wants Australia to develop sovereign AI capability here. Is that what Australia should be doing, building its own large language models?
I think probably individual countries trying to build their own fully domestic cutting-edge systems is probably not the right way to go. Maybe in a similar way to, if you think about back in the 80s and 90s, would it have made sense for Australia to try to have their own operating system rather than using Windows? I'm not sure that that's the right use of resources. I do think it makes sense to be looking very closely at what AI does Australia have access to. is there some kind of cooperation between, middle powers, other allies that could make sense? Could you think about having a backstop to US and Chinese models so that if something happens, you don't have to go straight back to the drawing board? I think all of those options are worth exploring, but I also think we should expect to be making significant use of US models just because they are pouring absolutely unbelievable amounts of resources, both financial resources and also extremely, extremely smart researchers. And that's going to really give them a lead, and Australia, I think, should be willing and able to use those AI systems as well. So I think some amount of sovereignty, thinking about worst case scenarios, looking at backstops potentially might make sense. Trying to fully get rid of any need to use foreign models, I think, would be a mistake.
Helen Toner, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks so much, Sarah.